everybody. Welcome to Intentional Money Moves Live. I am so happy that you're here with me today. If you are just joining live, let me know that you're watching. Say hello. Let me know where you're watching from too. It's always fun to see who is in the room. Now, I want to ask you something right off the bat today. Here's my question. Is there a financial decision that maybe has just been sitting on your to-do list that you know you need to do, but you just haven't moved on it yet? I want you to think about that for a minute. Maybe it's been there for a week. Maybe it's been there for a month. Maybe it's been there for a year, right? You've Googled it. You've talked to friends about it. You might have even made a pros and cons list and you're still feeling stuck. Now, first of all, I want you to know, I see you. If you are in that position, I want you to know that we absolutely understand. And we're going to talk about why that happens, right? It's not because you're stuck. It's not because, you might be stuck, but it's not because you're bad with money. It's not because you're lazy or you're irresponsible or you're not smart enough. It's none of that. And I know that a lot of you have that self-talk in your head that you think that some of those things are true, but they're not. Okay. You're stuck because you may not have a framework for making those financial decisions with confidence. And that is what we are going to be talking about today. So let's get started. Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for being here today. I'm glad that you are looking forward to today's conversation. She says she needs to buy some things for her house that she has not pulled the trigger on yet. I'll put these comments. Let me see if I can put this up here so you guys can see this. Who else has something specific on their mind that they may have been sitting on for a while? I would love for more of you to share in the comments, if you're willing, what you've been thinking about. But before we get into the framework, let's talk about what is actually happening and why people stall when it comes to financial decision making, because I do think that a lot of people really do blame themselves, and I want to offer a different story. Okay, because honestly, this is what we deal with in the work that we do is financial decision making. We deal with it every single day, and so I want you to know that you're not alone. And let's talk about some of these reasons. So first and foremost, a lot of women stall because they're just afraid of getting it wrong. Not the oops, I made a mistake kind of fear, but that deeper fear, that fear that wrong means something about who you are, like your worth or your capability or your future. That's a pretty deep-seated fear for a lot of people. Second reason, and this is one that I am absolutely guilty of on occasion, is analysis paralysis. So for a lot of us, more information feels like more safety, right? So we keep researching, we keep reading, we keep asking one more person. We convince ourselves that we just need to know a little bit more before we can decide. But that day never comes, right? I've definitely been there. The third reason, and this one I see a lot in my practice coming up for people, and that's conflicting advice. You ask 3 people, you get 4 opinions, right? Your mom says one thing, your coworker says something else, Google says something completely different, right? And so you freeze because you don't know which one to go with, right? And the fourth reason is that you are waiting for certainty. We want to know for sure that this is the right move. We want to know that, absolutely, there's no question. The fact of the matter is, this is the thing about certainty. Certainty doesn't exist. It's a lie, right? The women who build wealth are not the ones who are waiting to be certain. They are the ones who learn to make good decisions, even when they didn't have certainty. And the last one, and this is a big one, is not trusting yourself, right? Because somewhere along the way, most of us learned that somebody else knew better than we did about our own money, whether that was a spouse or a parent or a financial planner we didn't fully understand, right? We outsourced that confidence to other people, and now it's really hard to get it back. And here's the other thing that I see all the time. When women do try to make a financial decision, a lot of times they're starting straight into the numbers, right? That's the starting point, the strategy, like the spreadsheet. Okay. And even when we do like full comprehensive financial plans for people, we ask them to take a step back because here's the thing, the numbers really aren't the problem and they're not the solution either, right? Confident decisions are more about getting clear on your values and your mindset and then looking at the data, right? It is exactly what we're going to talk about in the intentional decision method that goes like it's designed directly from the intentional money method. But it is the same thing that we do with our clients when we're starting to create a financial plan for people. We always start with that initial conversation about goals and priorities before we get into the numbers for this very reason. Okay. So remember, the intentional money method is built on 6 pillars. Okay. So today we're going to apply every single one of those pillars to whatever decision feels stuck for you. So I know Jennifer was the only one brave enough so far to put it in the chat. If anybody else wants to put it in the chat, what is a decision that maybe has been on your mind? It could be something new, right? It could be something that you've been struggling with for weeks or months. Go ahead and share that in the chat with us. We're going to look at a framework that's really going to help walk you through how to think about this decision. And I think you may have a very different relationship with this once you walk through this. So if you feel comfortable identifying it in the comments, and even if you're watching the replay, go ahead and put it in the comments and let us know what you're thinking about. We can help you with some resources also. So step 1 is clarity. What decision are you actually making, right? And here's what I see all the time. A lot of times women think they're stuck on one decision, but then when we really dig into it, it turns out that there may be something under the surface that is like really the one that we need to address, right? They think the question is, should I invest in this or should I accept this job offer? Should I hire somebody to help me? But underneath that question is the bigger question, right? Do I trust myself? Do I deserve this? What happens if I'm wrong? And if you can't answer a question, you haven't really clearly named it yet. Okay. So the first step is to write down the decision in one sentence, one clear, specific sentence, not I need to figure out my finances. That's not a decision. That's a feeling, right? Try, I need to decide whether to move my emergency fund from my checking account into a high yield savings account by the end of the month, right? Like that's a very specific decision that we can really focus on and address. Like Jennifer gave the example for what she's doing in her home, specific decor, right? So curtains or blinds for the windows, right? So those are our specific things, right? So if you can't write it in one sentence, you're not ready to make the decision yet because you need the clarity first, right? And that's okay. That is absolutely okay. But knowing that's going to save you a lot of wasted energy because so often we're trying to make the decision on something that we haven't even clarified yet, right? Step 2 is values. Does this align with what matters most to me? Okay. And again, we're talking about before we're even looking at numbers, I want you to run this decision through your values filter, right? So in this example, like Jennifer shared, she's doing some work on her home. You know, if you really value creating a space that feels like home, that, you know, a certain aesthetic or whatever the value is you have around your home, then this decision is going to be an important one, right? If this is not something that's important to you, you're trying to make a decision on something that's not even important to you, then maybe there's something else going on there, right? So that's where this is coming from, right? It could be like a values misalignment. Sometimes people think it's like a lack of discipline, but it's really not. I had a client once who she kept stalling on increasing her retirement contributions. And she had the money, the math worked, right? But she still just couldn't pull the trigger on it. And when we finally slowed down to talk about her values, what we discovered was that right now, being present for her kids during a particularly challenging season in their lives was the most important thing, right? And so she had this fear that if she allocated more money to her retirement, that she would have less flexibility now, less cash flow now, less ability to really show up for them. So for her, that decision wasn't really about retirement at all. It was about security versus really presence. And once she was able to name that, we could actually solve the right problem, right? And she was able to make that decision with confidence. But really important to sit with that question, right? If money were no object, if you did not have to worry about whether you could afford this or not, would you still want it? It's a good question to ask yourself, right? If the answer is yes, then you have a values alignment. If the answer is no, or you're not sure, that's great information, okay? Not a roadblock, it's a clue, it's information, all right? Step 3 is mindset. So what fear is actually driving the hesitation? What fear is actually driving the hesitation? This is the step that most financial frameworks are just going to skip over entirely. And in all honesty, in the work that I do, it is the most important one. It's the most important one. We have to name the fear, not just push through it, not pretend like it doesn't exist, not shame ourselves for having it. Name it, right? Because the fear you can't name has all the power, but the fear you can name, that you can work with, right? That you can really start to make some decisions around. So fear of getting it wrong. What does that say about you, right? That's a really common one. Fear of success and how it might change your relationships or change your sense of self. That's a common one. Scarcity thinking, that quiet voice that says, what if this is the wrong move? What if I lose everything that I've worked for? Impostor syndrome, that's a really big one. Who am I to make decisions this big, right? So I want you to think about some of those. Just pick one that maybe resonated with you. If there's a fear that's sort of loudest for you right now, and you don't have to put it in the chat, you don't have to identify it, but if you're willing to, I think that for a lot of people that could be really beneficial to see that they're not alone. So whether you're watching live or you're watching the replay, if you want to share that in the chat, that's awesome. But even if you don't, you might consider doing some journaling around it, right? Really getting clear on what is the fear underneath that hesitation, and what's the story behind that, right? And the more you can kind of dig into that, you're going to start to find some things that come up for you that are really valuable. And here's what I want you to know for certain. You cannot make a truly confident decision from a fearful place, okay? The decision you make from fear, it's always going to feel shaky. It's always going to feel like it needs defending, right? Like it's being second guessed. That fear does not have to disappear. It doesn't have to disappear. It just has to be named, because again, once we name it, then it really stops running the show. Jennifer said, fear of making the wrong decision comes up for me a lot because I've made mistakes in the past and have to live with it. Yeah, absolutely. Right. We've all made decisions in the past about various things in our lives that maybe were maybe felt right in that moment, but looking back may not have been the best option, right? And so many of us hold on to so many stories around these things that limit our opportunities going forward, right? Step 4 is strategy. So what do the facts actually say? And this is where we're looking at the numbers. And again, we're looking at the numbers fourth, not first, right? And here is why the order matters so much. When you try to make a financial decision just starting with the data becomes the verdict, right? It becomes evidence either for or against you. And your brain is going to be filtering it through that fear and that uncertainty. So it gets distorted, okay? But when you do steps 1 through 3 first, the data is just information, right? It's just information. It's neutral. It's useful. It's something that you can actually work with. So now you get to look at the real options. Like, what are the actual trade-offs here? What does the math say? What are the risks on each side? What do you need to know that you don't know yet? And how do you get that information? Where do you get that? What questions do you have, right? And sometimes, honestly, a lot of the time, when you get to this step after doing the first 3, the decision is just obvious. Not because you have more data, because you finally have the clarity, you have the alignment, you have the courage to really see it, okay? So step 5 is to take that action, make the decision, define the next step. And here's where we're actually going to make moves, right? And here's the thing. Before I get into the last one, because with all the women that I've worked with over the years, I'm going to ask you for one next step, because perfectionism tells you that you need to see the whole staircase before you can even take the first step. And intentional decision making says, what is the very next thing you need to do? So maybe it is talking with your financial planner. Maybe it is opening an account you've been putting off. Might be sending an email, having a conversation, right? Sitting down tonight and looking at your numbers. Make the decision, write it down, say it out loud, tell somebody, right? But you don't need to see the whole staircase, right? A good decision today beats a perfect decision that is never made. And so many people sit in that paralysis for so long that decision never gets made. Okay. So remember, a good decision made today is going to beat that perfect decision that's never made every single time, right? All right. The last step is support. So who is in your corner as you execute? And this, honestly, it's a step that most people skip. And it's the reason why a lot of really good decisions quietly die. Here's what happens. You make the decision. You feel fantastic. You have a plan. And then life gets busy. Gets loud. Kids need something. An unexpected car repair, right? And the decision you were so fired up about just kind of fades away. Not because you changed your mind, but because you're trying to do it alone. And I want you to ask yourself something honestly. Who knows about this decision right now? Who's going to ask you about it in 2 weeks? Who is going to celebrate with you when you follow through on it, right? The answer is nobody. That is part of the problem. It's not your discipline. It's not your commitment. The absence of support can be part of the problem. Want to be very clear here. Accountability is absolutely not a weakness. Accountability is not a weakness. It is one of the most powerful tools available to you. And the women who I watch who are building real wealth, they're not always the smartest in the room. They're not always the most disciplined. They are the ones who said, I'm not doing this alone. I know I need support, right? And honestly, it's what we do in the Empowered Sisterhood that is so powerful. Yes, Melanie, support systems are absolutely essential. Absolutely. And it's why we built the Empowered Sisterhood. I keep watching women who have all the information they need, right? They've read the books, they listen to the podcast, they listen to the lives, right? They knew what they were supposed to do, and still they were stuck. And the missing piece almost every single time, it really is that community piece, that support, women who are doing the work alongside them and holding them accountable. Inside the sisterhood, it's what we do. We work through decisions just like the ones you might have on your mind today, right? We do it together with real women who have real life experience. So if today resonated with you and you have an interest in learning more about the sisterhood, always just don't hesitate to reach out. So we have a framework, and now I want to show you exactly what this framework looks like in real life so we can walk through a very specific case. So I'm going to walk through one decision. We'll go through this example. All right. I'm just pulling up my notes here. So this is a good example from a client that I worked with recently. With her permission, I did change the details. She'd been sitting with a decision about whether to stop paying extra on her mortgage and redirect that money to her investment account instead. And she had the same amount of money either way. So she had been stuck on this for a little while, and it's something that we kind of walked through here together recently. So we started with clarity, right? What is the actual decision being made? Remember, whenever we're talking about making the decision, we want to be very clear and concise. What specifically are we looking at? And remember how often it is where somebody identifies the decision that they're wrestling with, and that's actually not the one that we want to focus on, right? We want to get very clear what is the decision. In this example, the client that I'm talking about, it's kind of that cash flow allocation, right? She continue paying more toward her mortgage, or does she increase her investing in her investing account instead. Okay. So very, very specific. We want to look, step 2 is at values, right? And so what we did was we talked a lot about what is most important to her, what she values. And she is somebody who really is weighed down by debt. She really, really struggles with debt. Okay. And this is honestly, this is a conversation I will say that comes up for quite a few people. You'd be surprised at how many times we talk with clients about this particular conversation. And I have to say, from a values perspective, it really changes the dynamic of this conversation in a very meaningful way. Because when we do get to the numbers, we'll talk about that in a minute, that may have a different answer than what your values say. Okay. So in this particular example, this client really, really struggled with debt. It weighed on her. It created anxiety for her. It was something that she was really uncomfortable with. Right. And from a mindset perspective, that underlying fear was always that she was going to be in a position where she wasn't going to be able to meet her debt obligation. That was something that was really weighing on her, and she was very concerned about. She lost her job or something. She just wanted to not have any debt, so she didn't have those ongoing payments every month. So we looked at the strategy. What do the facts say? Well, in this particular example, she had a pretty low interest rate on her mortgage. It was only about 3.5%. And a lot of times when we're looking at making a decision around cash allocation, we're looking at debt repayment versus investing. A lot of times we're looking at interest expense versus return expectations, right? If we can make more money investing it, then we can save by reducing debt. And a lot of times that's the obvious strategic choice. Now for her, that didn't make sense. It didn't make sense because of the weight of what she was experiencing by carrying debt. And for some people, there's a lot of weight associated with that. And so for her, it made more sense for her to continue to reduce that payment, the mortgage, to reduce the mortgage in order for her to be in alignment with her values. Okay. Now, I said before, we have this conversation with clients all the time. And a lot of times we actually end up with the opposite decision, that we're able to make greater returns by investing those funds when somebody has a really low mortgage rate. But again, that was not in alignment with the values and the fears that she was experiencing. So when we really dissected those things, they're not going away. We name them and we address them, right? And so for her, it did not make sense to make that adjustment. She continued to pay down on the mortgage, and we're going to continue to check in. That's the thing about financial decisions. Your financial life is dynamic. It changes over time, right? You work with your financial planner, you work with your community, whoever you're using for accountability. Things are going to come up. They're going to change. You're going to have new conversations, right? She may get to a point where she feels more confident in her overall cash flow and she's not as worried about the debt, right? Maybe she gets more comfortable with her income situation. And that decision may change, right? It doesn't have to be a one-time decision. But for now, this is the right decision based on where she's at, okay? So hopefully that helps you as an example of what you might be thinking of. Any of you are have decisions that you're working on and you feel like dropping them in the chat, be happy to talk those through with you, absolutely. But I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for being here today and having an open mind to really thinking and talking about money differently. I have gotten some pushback since I started doing these. And, it's really interesting to hear some of the things that I've heard from community members and from our audience. And I think that, when we challenge the status quo, there's going to be some pushback in a healthy way. And so if some of this really resonated and you want to continue the conversation, I do want to encourage you. There are lots of other people who have an open mind and are willing to look at these things differently, and reach out anytime. And if this resonated with you also, or somebody who's struggling with a financial decision, be sure to share it with them, because this framework can really help reduce the stress and to create very clear system for feeling aligned with the decisions that you're making. Could you list the 6 steps again, please? Thank you. I would love to. Thank you for asking the question. And actually, maybe I can put them. Let's see if I can pop them in the chat and then they will show up on the video. So step 1, it starts with clarity. Remember, we're looking at getting a very specific sentence that identifies the decision. We want to get as specific as we can around that decision, right? And then step 2 is values. We want to get clear on whether or not the decision is in alignment with our values or not before we even look at the numbers. That's really important. So step 2 is going to be values. Step 3 is mindset. And that's where we really start to get back to what are some of those underlying fears that might be running in the background, that if we can name them, then we can start to deal with them, acknowledge, and decide, should they be in the foreground, or, is it something that we can work through? And then step 4 is strategy. That's where we actually look at the numbers. So once we have the clarity, we've worked through the values, we know where the fears are, and we're clear in terms of mindset, that's when we start to look at the numbers, and that's where strategy comes in. Step 5 is when we take that action, right? Step 5 is action, and let me pop that up there. And then last, but certainly not least, and the one that is so commonly just ignored, or, I think people just don't realize how important it is, but that's support. Step 6 really is critical with support. We see it all the time. People making so much more progress, being in community and having accountability. And that's so, so, so important. Jennifer said, I'd love to hear that quote again. A good decision is better than a decision that's not made. That's right. A good decision is better than a perfect decision that is never made, right? That perfect decision that we're waiting for. Thank you for asking, Jennifer. Yeah. A good decision is always going to be better than that perfect decision that never gets made, right? We're waiting for that perfect decision, and we never make a decision. Well, that kind of is a decision, right? But it might not be the one that's in alignment with your values. It might not be the one that's, really in your best interest when we're kind of putting those off. So, all right. Again, thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you for participating in the chat, and I will see you next week.